So what is the one customer behavior that has surprised you through the lockdown period? What did you kind of observe? I mean, beyond the hoarding of toilet paper, what did you observe and go, wow, I didn't see that coming? So I'll leave you to mull over that one and I'll pop back on at the end of the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Katie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, it's always an interesting question for us because we sit in the retail space where all of the most hoarded elements were really talked about in the public sphere. I think rather than it being a specific item or a shift, it was probably how it continued to move through different categories. So we started with toilet paper, and then it became about pasta, and then we decided, oh, I'm going to take up a hobby like baking. So all of a sudden, we couldn't get enough yeast on the shelves, and it was more for us, I think, the continuous shift of something that needed to have its supply chain really looked at for how we could quickly move. Probably one I could give that's similar to that is how quickly many businesses that only supplied the commercial sector, so think about delicatessens and cheese providers and things, started to very quickly shift and go, well, how can we get our product into shelves? So, if you asked a year ago whether 15-kilo bags of flour would be on a supermarket shelf, I'm pretty sure we all would have said no. So some of those shifted elements where it's like, well, we can't get more of what we're used to seeing in there, but we can start to get you some of the commercial product that's not going to businesses. And I think that was quite interesting. The alcohol consumption as well was quite interesting. Take restaurants away from us and we buy a hell of a lot more alcohol for home.
Yeah, looks like that.
What about for yourselves?
For me, the biggest surprise was I would have thought when people didn't have to go out, when they locked down, they wouldn't have to buy clothes, but maybe I was wrong. So the biggest surprise for us was people bought more clothes than they did before lockdown. So that's one thing that was a massive surprise for us. Even within that, it's just like you mentioned, just the different categories that they purchased was interesting. So a lot more people are working from home, a lot of these Zoom calls, whatever calls you want to call them. And suddenly I think everyone realized that they didn't want to wear professional stuff. And they couldn't wear what they had at home, so they had to buy activewear. So activewear went through the roof. Sweatshirts went to the roof. Jackets went through the roof. So I remember reading a stat somewhere that in Australia, we sold 800% more sweatshirts year on year than last year. So every 8 times more sweatshirts were sold year on year. So everybody suddenly realized that the best thing to wear is a sweatshirt. Wear anything, just wear a sweatshirt, get on a call. So that's one thing. And also all the beauty stuff, which is not necessarily beauty, like healthcare, like skincare, moisturizer, cream, and stuff like that. These have gone through the roof. So again, interesting. It basically points to the fact that people are working from home more, and they're just getting more used to working from home and trying to do this. That was very interesting for us.
Did you find, thinking about that, more purchasing at home, did you find that also shifted the mix of like mobile versus desktop and browser behavior? Like, have you seen shifts in where those sales are coming from, or is it really more just more stuff?
It's funny. We are more heavily on the app and mobile, and then what we've seen is we have so many more desktop customers coming through and desktop users coming through, and it's because people are just sitting and like you wouldn't be able to do that in your cubicle or in your office, but you do that from home. Nobody's looking at your screen, so everybody's shopping, window shopping, and even the times that they shop for has become quite different. So you would have people typically, for us, the peak time was when people going into work and coming back from work. So on the bus in the morning or on the ferry, and that has changed drastically. People shop in the middle of the day a lot more now, rather than in the mornings and in the evenings. So both the time when they shop and also the device they've used has massively, like, completely changed from what it was. And I think it's not, I think now that things are opening up. Like, how is it for you guys? Do you guys notice a massive change in desktop versus mobile?
Yeah, I mean, we were already very heavily mobile based, but the actions people are changing, like people are taking is changing. So when you think about us, we're an intermediary between the retailer and the loyalty program that someone's connected to. So obviously, we saw massive spikes in store-based transactions for areas like Coles and parts like that. But for retailers like Target and Kmart, there was a greater shift towards online because that was less of an essential trip and more of a nice-to-have trip. So it kind of depended on the partner, and that's where the behaviour changed. And it was probably more where we saw points being collected and less so about the device, because we're already about 70% mobile driven by the channels and the programs that we use. But I know the part about the time of day stuff, and that certainly sits with myself and how our business. I think about my days now, and when I'm working from home all day, Like the word flexible has really, you know, like what we probably used to describe as flexible working compared to what we're living right now is completely different. It's like I will take the dog for a walk at 10 o'clock in the morning or like 6 o'clock in the afternoon. It'll change every day, but I also might jump on my laptop and do something for work at an hour that I never would have previously done that before. So, and I think that shows in our trends. We've gone from really clear spikes mid-morning and late afternoon to a more even trend that goes for a longer period of time.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that. So, hypothetically, would you like to go back to work now that it's all changed and you're used to working from home?
I think that I will work from home more now than I did before, but I definitely sit in the camp of going back into the office. I think there are certain things in the digital space where that collaborative environment where you do something together around a whiteboard and you really try and solve a problem. We've gotten pretty good at doing it remotely, but I think we're all still getting to those final parts where we'd prefer, like there are certain things we think we'd be more effective if we were doing them in that group collaboration. One thing I think we'll do differently forever is our release process. So I'm sure you guys are similar to us. We don't generally try to release new technology in the middle of our peak periods or at high traffic times with customers. We generally do these out of hours. And so we would have, you know, people on shift-based approaches to be in the office at really odd hours, whereas now we've gotten pretty good at releasing technology all remotely and from our laptops. So we'll probably continue to release late at night, but there'll no longer be that expectation that we all need to be in the office together to make that happen, which is definitely a win. I don't need to go into the office at 10 o'clock at night.
That's interesting. And I think we have a comment here from Sia Playgroup Queensland. It says, we found more online member engagement in the beginning, but it has dropped again. Do you think people felt the need to have a voice more in the beginning, but now it feels like it's back to normal? I think if I understand the question right, I think it probably is trying to say that a lot of online people went online at the start and then they gave up on online. Is that, I'm assuming that's what the question means. What do you think about that?
I think the thing is that people went more online because they were at home more, but what they were looking for was different as well. So if I think about actually the trends in our space, we saw a drop in traffic initially into our assets because in the grand scheme of your life, when this situation started, a loyalty program is fairly low on the priority order. And we expected that. We saw a lot of behavior. People were still presenting their cards. There was still a lot of transactions, but that engagement with things like redeeming your points or accessing your account online to check offers, that had dropped in the priority order. So we probably saw a bigger hit to traffic initially that started shifting well before the situation or the restrictions eased, because that engagement started to come back as people got more comfortable with what this pandemic meant. They started going back to being interested in more normal things that sat outside of that really core things that are important right now. I'm not sure about yourselves. I mean, I would have imagined that the trend in fashion retail was an increasing one rather than a decreasing.
Yeah, that's true. I think because there were no store open, the people did have to come online. And I think pretty much a lot of people did come online at the start and maybe they didn't find what they were looking for. And so that started tapering eventually, and also they've eventually realized there are a lot more online players in the market.
Yeah.
I think in Australia it's very fragmented like that. There's not one Amazon, there's like so many players in the market. It's really good. So
actually probably the other point I should make, that what's been really important for us now in terms of we're starting to see engagement growth again has been when our partners have felt their business start to turn back to some more traditional models. So for us, as we lost engagement early on in the piece, a part of that was also driven by, we went from being a channel where we would send offers to people around these partners to being a channel that would communicate how the situation was affecting those partners. So for us, the turning point has also been those partners going back to their business as usual. So once they start to do the activities that they used to do, I've certainly noticed all of the EFS advertising coming up on TV again this year. And the same is happening in our channels, where there's a lot more partner offers and content and opportunities for members to engage coming through our channels now that it's hit June. And the behaviours that are coming off the back of that are very similar to what they've previously been.
And so when you talk about customers, like during the peak, right? So did you hear a lot from customers? Like, do you also have an opportunity to talk to customers through surveys and stuff like that and understand what it is that they wanted And it was an
Yeah.
opportunity to make amends to that. Like, is that something that you guys explore to do?
Yeah, so we've been doing a bit of monitoring through those times in terms of the trends and people's attitudes during the COVID experience. And it's funny, it managed to make it into a pulse that we were doing, how members were responding the trend towards making sourdough starters. And that got a bit of a laugh across the organisation, because even when you're trying to get these overarching trends of how people behave, some of those cues that we've seen in social channels and others are still the thing that everybody's talking about. So it's a hard one for us. I think we were too far in the middle. Like, a lot of what we've done has felt relatively normal during this period, with just a change to the message we're communicating, not necessarily how often someone interacts with us.
Okay. Interesting. So I think one thing I wanted to ask you, right, and I think it's the famous thing that's attributed to Winston Churchill, which is never let a good crisis go to waste. Is now that COVID crisis happened, and you did mention something about releasing a lot more products during over time. Like, is there anything else that you've done that you've always wanted to do for a long time, both from a tech and a digital point of view, that you had to ram through really fast because there's a good opportunity to do it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually think I'll use an example of what one of our partners is doing rather than what we're doing. So people may or may not remember, it was quite a while ago now, but the supermarket giants have pulled their physical catalogues. And anyone on here who's ever worked for a retailer that produces a catalogue knows how significant printing these catalogues every week, month, whatever time frame you do them on is for the business, and how it corrals all of your kind of merchandise functions together for this one output. And the biggest fundamental shift into the new plans for next year is that a significant portion of the request that's coming from partners like Coles is for us to look at initiatives and works that helps them completely digitize that experience and start to truly shift back. And I don't know for sure, because I'm not there, I'm not working, but I wouldn't be surprised if Coles use this as a moment to truly move away from a physical version of that and replace it with a more digital experience. The interesting part is we are just a way to help them enable that. So it's still a piece that sits with them, but it's really interesting for us to see how we can play a greater role for these partners in just the dissemination of information for them to relevant customers who are highly engaged with their brand.
Okay. That makes sense.
I'd like to throw the same question back at you.
So for us, we've been waiting for a long time to kind of apply data to solve a lot of these operational efficiency problems. Like, when do we replenish something? What new categories to bring in? And we didn't do it as much in Australia, but in other regions of the world, what we've done is we've always wanted to bring in beauty and healthcare and more sports and leisure and apparel. And I think this is a good opportunity to storm through and push into those new segments without having to do the whole balance sheet analysis, do the whole market. Like, we know that there's a demand, and then there's never a good opportunity to get to a new market than now. I think that's something that we definitely pushed forward and did. And a lot more changes from trying to apply data to solve problems is things we were always thinking, and things that were more of a whiteboard exercise. We're almost all actualized. We actually released 8 new algorithms. We released 15 new reports and stuff like that. So a lot more things that we were always thinking about in the back of our heads, we were able to release it and get people to use it, because now never is a good time to use data than now. So that was the thing.
Yeah. And then I think that's a good segue in then to a question, and you touched on it slightly, but I would imagine a lot of people here have views around how data is used within the fashion industry, but I would imagine you use it for many more reasons than people understand. What are the things that you find people are most surprised about when they find out that's how you actually use your data to improve a process or a function?
Yeah. So typically when people say, oh, you work for a fashion company, the best you might be doing is recommendation systems if on one extreme, or marketing and customer segmentation on the other extreme, but we do a lot more operational stuff too. So I can give you one example of what we use data for, and that you can extrapolate it to everything. And so at the warehouse out in Parramatta, out here in Sydney, what we do is we have pickers picking items. We fulfill some of the items ourselves. So we have a picker manually walking and picking an item and then dispatching and delivering it. So a picker in a typical month walks 3,250 kilometers a month. So he or she walks 3,250 kilometers a month to pick items. So the challenge that was given to us was, how can you optimize and make their lives easier by making them walk much smaller distances to fulfill the same item? So it's what you call the traveling salesman problem or route optimization problem. So we would know which item is located where. So first we'll have to figure out how to locate the items in a way where it can be picked easily based on how they sell. Then we have to design how the picker goes and picks the item so that it takes the least amount of time. And the third one is we need to make sure the orders coming in are batched and split in a way. So we use some operational research algorithms to do that. And that will actually save around 26% of the time that's spent walking somewhere. So they can pick the same items in 26% of this time. So a lot of operational efficiencies, like when do you replenish something, what is the size curves you need to buy, a lot of other stuff is also something we do with data at the Iconic and other close groups.
Yeah.
Cool. I have a question from Hal Josephson, and maybe we'll jump into it and come out later. It says, will social media influencers play a more or less significant role in customer buying choices in the coming few years? So yeah, I'll answer that first, and I'll pass it on to Katie. So at least from a consumer demand point of view, from a consumer focused products point of view, definitely, I think it has been on the uptrend. I've seen a lot more social media influence driven products being purchased. They become a channel of their own right. So previously they would be clubbed under social as a channel. Now influencers, brand influencers is a channel in itself. And I think it reaches out to a totally different audience. So it's almost like a new acquisition opportunity rather than talking to your existing customer base. Is how I think about influencers, because you couldn't touch your customers. The people you typically reach out through TV and radio and print, I think they are just being reached out to a single person who has much more reach on social media. I think it definitely is a worthy channel, at least for products that need some kind of approval from someone else. And so in the fashion industry, it definitely makes a lot of difference to have a social influencer. How about you, Katie? What do you think?
I would agree with that. I think two things will happen in the space. I think we've always got to remember that a big part about this is what you said, is where audiences are. And so on many of these channels where influence is happening, it's more about how you could even possibly reach an audience that sits in those spaces. I think you're absolutely right where brand influence and, what for some brands done of things like TikTok, which I certainly don't use, but I understand it's the new huge thing for a younger audience, is that brands are able to actually build themselves as a reputable force. I think initially in the influencer space, it felt like it was predominantly other kind of word of mouth style influence initially, because that's how people saw the platforms. But as the platforms grow and people's attitude to how they interact changes, we're happier to hear from brands directly in those channels, which will continue to grow. But I think the other thing that will shift more because of what's happened recently is that the types of influencers that people are following is what's going to change. So I think it's more about brands really staying on the pulse of who is of influence and why they're of influence, and what kind of audiences are resonating with that message, and working out their brand alignment. So where we were a year ago, where travel influencers that lived, the inspo life across the globe may have been where you wanted to associate your time and energy, there are other voices at the moment that have continued to grow and resonate during this time, and maybe there's a different connection or link that means more to your customers now with a different type of voice to what it did previously.
Okay, makes sense. Cool. So I'll just come back to the thing that we were talking about, right? About what is it that people typically think you do and what you. So the standard meme, what your mom thinks you do, what your partner thinks you do, and what you really do. So from a Flybuys point of view, when you talk about Flybuys, do people typically ask you what kind of data you work with, and can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of data you work with and what kind of things you help solve using data?
Yeah, absolutely. In a similar way, I can start by giving an example like yours in terms of using data to improve the picking process. One of the things that Flybuys can help support brands in is range reviews and range decisions. So understanding not just what people are buying, but the relationship between what people are buying. So, for example, you might go into, how sometimes you go into a store and there's like 45 versions of toothpaste, and the choice is overwhelming, and you don't know what to do or what you actually want, because there's more choice, but you can't differentiate between them. So the work that we use can help with using data to actually turn around and say, well, actually, these products are substitutable, these products aren't. They've got very specific and dedicated customers, and if you take that off the shelves, you lose these sales. Versus in this space, you could rationalize that range and you'll see a shift behavior that won't actually be at the cost of sales. So we play a space in that kind of area. We also play a space for our partners in planning. So when they're moving into a new location or area, the data we have on where our existing customers are, where they're currently going. So who's likely to shift to another location, who's likely to start shopping at you that maybe you haven't had previously as a customer because there wasn't one that was in a convenient or known location. We can help with a lot of that, just initial understanding about where they should focus their effort and energy in terms of growing a customer base for a new store. I think a lot of the time when people ask me what we do or what we do or don't know, as much as people know that we're a loyalty program and that we send you offers based on the things that you buy, if you ask someone what data they think we have, it's funny how people get caught up in just the things that they know in the marketplace. So a lot of people go, how do you think we work out what offers to send you? And people are like, oh, you're probably watching my Google search data. And it just makes it's go like, well, no, because we're not Google. It's not that part's not our data. The data that relates to us, we have in that front. But it's that often that link is forgotten in the moment where they still can't turn around and articulate. It's like, oh, because you went in store and purchased that and you swiped your Flybuys card. So I think that it's just interesting that as soon as you get into that detail, people still think the data sources all come from the same places, forgetting that many of these businesses that are built on data like ours, we're built on a whole lot of data that is actually our first party data. And that's probably the biggest thing or the most important thing to Flybuys moving forward is the very high volume of valued first party data that we have and how we can use that to improve the shopping experience, to improve the member experience and to improve the partner experience. I think often when people think like when I say I work for Flybuys, most people instantly assume that I know everything that's happening at Coles, as an example, because they directly associate us with each other. But what they don't realise is in my day-to-day job, I don't even deal with contacts at Coles because my job is about the Flybuys website and the Flybuys app and our actual owned assets. I deal with teams internally who represent those partnerships and that they work on all those elements. But my own role, I think people forget that Flybuys, because we're not physical and tangible, that those elements that are Flybuys, like our own digital assets, are actually their own separate managed ecosystem that is separate from the partner network.
Okay. Fair enough. And I think that also wants me to ask you another question, right? So when you have so much data about customers, when you see what they're trying to do, are there anything that you guys are already planning in terms of what customers will do differently in 6 months from now? When say all the lockdowns have lifted, when the economy opens up again, and when JobKeeper stops and stuff like that. Like, have you thought about that? Is there a plan of action towards working towards that?
Yeah, it's a hard and it's an interesting one for us because again, it will kind of be category by category. We have separate plans depending on the industry we sort. So if you work in our arm that look after our travel partners, you have a heavy amount of planning that is about the transition back to these services. So they'll go from more of a customer service and a management model at the moment because they're still to this day dealing with people who have travel plans that were cancelled and need to be rebooked or whatever they might be there. So they'll go from a customer service model back to a growth model. And in some respects, I think for the parts of our business that were heavy hit, they will go back to an initial, fairly like business as usual approach to rebuild their base because they've lost a lot in that arm. I think it's probably more our partners who have seen heavy behaviour during this time, like the Coleses and the Kmarts and the other retail partners. They're the ones that are accelerating some of their digitised experience stuff that we're trying to actually throw off the back of. So partner by partner, it's changing. And I think where we want to provide additional, energy impact or support is probably more in the day-to-day of people's lives. So looking at that local model and what else is going on in the area and how Flybuys can support you in your everyday life is probably what's been accelerated in our pieces, like in our space compared to other parts, is that intersection with the everyday.
Interesting. It's interesting because, I can clearly see a difference in what people will want going forward. It's not going to be the same. As much as we call it the normal, it's probably a new normal or not even normal, semi-normal.
Yeah. And it'll be an interesting shift as well for when we've been at home and our behaviour is shifted towards these more online partners, but also our supermarkets and our retailers. As everything opens up again, a lot of them will start to drop off, and you'll see that growth back into the local market. I think I've lost you.
Are you here? Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, I can hear you now. I can see your face is frozen for me, though. Is my face moving?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my NBN is acting up. I'm sorry about that. I've closed pretty much everything.
I think thinking about that 6 months ahead for yourselves, when you think about the shift in behaviour of what people are buying fashion-wise, do you think that'll continue to change? Like, are you expecting that your summer season will be, oh, I think it's just down to me now.
No, hi. I hope I pop back in. Yeah, we're waiting for Kshira to come back on and off.
Yeah.
So you can riff with me. Don't worry. Keep going.
Well, it was funny because the question I was going to ask him is whether those fashion trends will continue. You know, what's it going to mean for their summer range, and elements that would have been already pre-planned. And if we're, I've said that to myself. I fall into his category where my skincare routine has stayed, but my makeup routine has not. I'm like, will I start wearing it again?
Exactly. And even the clothes we're buying now, I kind of look at my winter. I mean, we're in Brisbane, right? So I look at my winter wardrobe and go, I am never going to get to wear these jackets and coats anymore. Like, so I'm obviously not necessarily going to buy new ones to fill in the wardrobe, am I? Same with heels, really.
Yeah.
I'll back on. So I'm going to hop back out and leave you guys back to it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's very funny.
Sorry
It was quite funny as well because Nadine jumped in because we'd just lost you, and it was literally as I asked a question. So I was like, I can't answer my own question.
Sorry, I missed that question.
That's okay. The question was actually because you've obviously seen a very big shift in the kind of fashion people buy. Do you see that continuing for yourselves over the next 6 months? Like, are you looking at your summer range and thinking that what was planned for that needs to shift, or do you think we'll be back to semi-normal patterns by then?
Yeah, I think we're trying to change it massively for the fact that we've seen how people shop differently now. Just as much as socializing is going to be a thing, it's not going to be the same. And we definitely see. I think we spoke about it like last week, something where you said you don't feel like wearing a dress again anymore, or like wearing formal shoes. And I think people feel the same. People don't want to buy professional stuff as much. We're definitely seeing that shift, and also from our summer designs and summer collections, we're trying to completely move to more active wear rather than just going after the same collection that we had last year. So that we're trying to keep it as neutral as possible, so that you can pretty much wear it both at work and outside work. And so that's something that we're trying to do. There's definitely going to be a change in that. It just needs to be seen how much of a change is going to be when we hit summer.
Absolutely. I think one of the interesting things on that is, like, I don't see my own behavior changing, like my own behavior changes changing this year. But then when you move into next year, I'm sure you've already heard in like with friends or otherwise, how next year in terms of weddings is going to be this insane year because all the people that had them this year have cancelled them and moved them to dates next year. And then there's all the people that were already planning on doing them next year. So maybe the like cancelled event world is going to be what pulls us back into higher end fashion and getting out of the Ugg boots that I'm wearing right now with a dress.
And I think it's we never know, and I don't think it's still over yet. I don't think it's over till everybody goes back to work. So it's going to be really interesting. And I see Nicola's comment saying, I'm looking forward to dressing up. And while everyone's looking forward to dressing up, I think it's just how much of dress up that people want to do is still a big question. So it's going to be interesting. Showing the true challenges of working from home. We've all been there sometimes over the past 2 months. Yeah, agreed. Thanks, Caitlin.
Yeah, initially I was actually very impressed at how well my home internet survived my move home, because it can be pretty sketchy in peak periods in the evening. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, the amount of times I've had to drop out of a meeting and then jump back in again because something wasn't working, which actually leads me to, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think the next big technology revolution needs to be someone who really solves Bluetooth across multiple devices, because my cat's about to come and use the screen. Thanks for Clive. Have you felt the pain from working at home of having multiple devices both work and otherwise, and your Bluetooth speakers not being able to react quick enough to connect between different devices? I've reached the point where I don't even use headphones with my laptop because it's too confused.
I just use it because my laptop's even worse without it, so I have to make do with it. But yeah, I agree. And I think I was talking to someone yesterday. There's this new sketch called W1A on BBC. They made this new sketch on people doing Zoom calls. It's funny. It's just people spend so much time just talking to each other. I think that's a technology somebody needs to solve. I don't think video calls is the answer to working collaboratively.
No.
It definitely does not render the serendipity that you typically have in an office chat. You're walking down a hallway, you talk to someone, be it a water cooler chat or be it a normal chat. You just can't have that anymore, and that's going to be very difficult to recreate. I think, like in our situation, people on Fridays get a drink, bring a glass, and then do all the stuff. I think it's somehow still too virtual, and I think people dying to get back to the real world and trying to do the real stuff. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that we've all spoken about how we don't think our workplaces will ever go back to the way they were. And I think many people that are on here would have worked for brands in the past and probably still do, where technology is one of the biggest barriers to them being able to properly work flexibly anyway. You know, I've always had bosses that were supportive of the idea, but if you're not given technology that makes that work, it forces that idea that you want to go back to the office. So I think that absolutely you'll still see significant investment in these video platforms and the tools provided to teams well after the pandemic changes, because that's probably where I think there'll be this more marked ongoing impact. One of the very fortunate things about Flybuys, and probably why this situation has been so unique for us, is that Flybuys was Wesfarmers and Coles demerged last year, towards the start of last year, and in that demerger, one of the elements that happened related to Flybuys was that Flybuys was actually split out and turned into a joint venture between both. So we went from being a part of the Coles group and being a business unit within Coles to being our own entity. And so we've moved offices, we've changed locations, and that happened at the start of July last year. One of the decisions that was made alongside that was the technology future of Flybuys, and the decision was made straight off the bat that Flybuys would be a 100% cloud-based business. And so one of the reasons why our world hasn't changed, particularly in digital, in terms of what our roadmap has looked like during the COVID period, was because we were already working on a roadmap that was significantly more about our underlying technology platform and not the big customer facing initiatives. They're all kind of going to come next off the back of this new platform. And so we started working from home in the first week of March, and literally we went from 100% of the office in to 100% at home overnight, and everything continued to work because we already have our entire team on a fully remote model of laptop that all we need is an internet connection and everything works. We don't have any of your really annoying VPNs to connect into or any of those other elements. And we've been slowly migrating the rest of the Flybuys customer facing tech out of Coles and into the cloud for Flybuys. So we were very ready to work from home. It just hadn't been tested in practice. And that's why I don't think we'll change. But if I think about where I've worked previously, which is your bigger brands that have existed for 50, 60, 70, 100 years, I think they have had bigger fundamental change to get their workforce ready for this concept of flexible working than what it was in the.
Yeah, and I think digital first companies have definitely come out of this much better without having to worry about all of the clunkiness that comes with it. I definitely agree. Even we were set up to be working remote, so I even have a home office set up at home because I used to work from home much more from home than from work, so it was much easier for us. I'll just quickly go to a comment from Nicola that says, I was supposed to be leaving for my sister's wedding in the UK. Flight was supposed to be in 3 hours. I'll dress up again for 2 weddings next year. Definitely, Nicola, you know where to buy your stuff from. So just a small Cool. I think I just want to, in closing, I want to ask you something. So we spoke about how things have changed for customers. We spoke about what we plan to do for customers in 6 months from now. But was there anything that you had to drop because it seemed like a good idea before COVID, and now it seems like not such a good idea? Like you said, no longer, it doesn't work anymore. Makes no sense.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'd have to think about it.
I'll go first.
You go first, because I think I need to think about it in our context.
Yeah. So for us, it was mostly. I was thinking about this. For us, it was mostly more designer, high-end dresses, and we're going heavily on all of these unique designer, boutique designer dresses, trying to bring in US brands and stuff like that. And I think if people not even wanting to buy dresses, trying to go more high-end and more deeply into this is going to be much harder. So I think a lot of those decisions where we wanted to go deeper into it, we've just slowly pulled back from it and said, no, it's not the right time now, and I don't think people will want it. So that was one place where we said, nope, it's not a good idea anymore. How about you? Like anything that you saw that you think?
Actually, probably an example I can give you on that is we had a couple of initiatives that were related to like home movers, so people moving house, and also in the fuel space and like transport and road transport. Now, I think that it's probably too early for us to call that these things won't happen, but they did have to fundamentally get parked because they didn't make sense right now. People aren't in their cars. The house market is moving to an extent, but how it's moving and what people are doing is very different. So they're on the back burner. They're not off, but they're waiting for some much more significant market indicators of what people's new norm is going to look like before they can actually continue to move again. I guess the other one I mentioned is we do have a travel arm to our business and who do a lot of stuff in this space. I guess what they're preparing for more than anything is as you get towards spring in certain parts of this year, there are certain key periods where the shift of attention goes towards overseas travel. So the early sales for Europe flights for next year and those elements, it's still a bit of an unknown at this stage as to how much of the energy of that arm of the business will shift to local tourism and domestic travel versus how much will still be thrown. Because I think it's one of those ones where if there's a level of certainty of when international travel will be back by the time we get to those periods where normally those kind of flights will sell, there'll be a level of confidence that customer intent and interest is there. But it's just hard to know at the moment what the world's going to look like in September and whether by then people will feel confident in making the choice to buy overseas tickets. I think we're all hoping. I'm planning to go to Europe next year because I didn't go this year, but I have no idea when I'll be able to turn that plan in my head into something that I can actually book. And I think that's what our brand, like that's what our arms that look after this are really struggling with, is that at the moment they're focusing on different things, which is where we're starting to see closer trends in element and domestic travel. But I think they'll divert fairly quickly once it feels like those doors are opening again.
Nice, interesting. And I think that's
actually the other one they're worrying about is price. How much is it going to cost to fly to Europe now?
Yeah, and how much does it cost if you can't come back and have to stay back and quarantine?
Exactly.
That's even scary.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, hi. I got bombed again. Sorry, Kshira. Finish off. Keep going.
No, I was going to say Nadine's going to come in, and you just came in.
I felt you thinking that, didn't I? Well, thank you very much for that, Riff, guys. You are both fantastic, and you jumped in from trends to digital to what life is going to look like. Hopefully, towards the end of this pipe, we're kind of being pushed down. So thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, can you please give Katie and Kshira a round of applause using emojis, please? In normal style. I just want to see all the clapping hands come through the Facebook feed. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to let Katie and Kshira head back to their afternoons and their days, and I'm going to take a few moments to explain to you what we've got in store for Something Digital. So thanks again for joining us. So this. There we go. I'm going in and out. One has to love online events at the moment. So needless to say, it's 2020. Things need to be a little bit different. We've spent the last few months going through so many different plans and scenarios of what the Something Digital Festival could look like for 2020. We just wanted to really make sure that we can give you the really fantastic experience where we've been running through at the moment, but also doing it obviously in a COVID-safe way. But we're very excited with where we're heading. So I'm going to start by saying that. We're putting our stake in the ground. We are running the digital festival in October 2020, and we are going to be running it with an in-person or an real life component. So we're actually, for 2020, we're actually going rogue. We're throwing out the rule book. We're re-changing the way we run our festival, and we're actually dubbing it the Rebel Edition. For 2020, Something Digital will be run as a hybrid event, part online and part in person, giving you the best of both worlds and the flexibility to join us in whatever mode you feel is right for you. So what this really means is that the in-person elements will be run across multiple smaller venues in Brisbane, pretty much like a real-life festival would be. And this will give you the chance to pick and choose those sessions that are of most interest to you whilst enjoying, that magic of real-life events again. The online edition will run in tandem and will give us the opportunity to break through our city walls and to expand Something Digital to the whole of Queensland to support our digital ecosystem in general. It's going to give us more opportunities to connect, collaborate with our regional colleagues, and also learn from our fabulous speakers. In addition to all this, because of course there is more, we are significantly increasing our content, taking the curated program of the festival from 1 day to 3. And we're doing this because we feel that it's extremely important for us to take the time to dive deeply into those aspects of digital innovation that are strengthening our organizations and that are making us more resilient to the external disruptions that we are inevitably going to keep facing. In fact, the new theme for Something Digital is a brave new world. Because if there's one thing we've learned over the past few months, is that we need a lot of courage, a lot of resilience, and a little bit of risk to survive in this new world order. What will remain constant is our focus on building digital capabilities, on bringing together the entire digital ecosystem, and on showcasing the great and fantastic innovations that are happening right here in our backyard. In a year when events are being cut back, we are doubling our investment because we truly believe that digital is the key to economic recovery. And to help you be part of this fabulous festival, we are releasing a limited number of launch special tickets. So essentially, you'll be able to